Welcome to the Prosperity Playbook. Thanks for tuning in with us. We've got Renee Gogler and Britt Murphy here today, and we are going to talk to you about responsible doggy ownership. We chatted in our last episode about not getting a puppy when you go to college.
Oh,
So,
perfect photo bomb moment for Wrigley.
hi, Wrigley.
If you're watching this on Spotify, you might want to change and watch YouTube so you can see the adorable golden retriever photo bomber that just entered the room.
Renee and I are both very much dog people. Courtney's a dog person as well. She unfortunately has the summer cold today, so is lying low at home. But with owning a dog comes a lot of responsibility. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people get a dog just because they like them and they don't realize everything that goes into it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, it depends on the stage of your life where you're at. But I think before you get a dog, that's the biggest thing to realize, do I really have time for this dog? And can I be a good dog owner? Because I think my husband and I grew up on farms and ranches. So being a dog owner there was very different. They were kind of like free range dogs and they did their thing and they, they weren't a lot of work. So we got this border collie because that's, we're farm kids. And then we realized that border collies need a job or they are going to be bored and they're going to be miserable and they're going to be naughty. And so our solution to that was we started running agility competitions. I don't mean we, I mean, I started running agility competitions with Cody, which was our dog.
Love it.
And it was great, but we didn't have kids at the time. We hadn't started our businesses yet. So I had disposable time to be able to give to this dog. So I think that's the first thing is know what your time commitment is and what it can be. And then make sure that you choose a dog breed accordingly. If you don't have a lot of time to run agility competitions with a dog, don't get a border collie.
I grew up with labs, which our labs were all pretty lazy and just snuggly and mellow. And I got a border collie skipper key mix as the pup that I got when I went to college. I, at that point in my life, thought that all types of dogs had the same personality. I didn't know that different breeds had different energy levels and whatever. So when he was a puppy, he kept nipping at my heels.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand what he was doing. And so I called my vet and I was like, he's biting my heels and he's running all over the house, running in circles around us. What's going on? And she was like, he's hurting you. And I thought that she said hurt, Hurt. And I was like, no, he's not hurting me. And she's like, no, he's herding you.
Yeah.
So I had to do a deep dive on Google and figure out what kind of dog I got and what was going on.
Well, and that's an important thing. And especially if you're somebody that has kids, that's something to be very aware of because they don't necessarily know that they could be hurting a kid. And I guess on that note, I've always said I would never 100% trust any dog around a kid. We had a friend when my daughter was little that they had a black lab and the lab was sleeping and their little boy kind of toddled over and fell on the dog. And the dog was in a dead sleep. He didn't do anything wrong. He got scared and turned around and bit him. And it bit a big chunk in his face. The kid still has a majorly scarred up face because of it. And that was a super sweet black lab. That dog would have not hurt a fly if he intended to, but it still happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
And those things do happen. And I think you got to be really careful of kids and dogs and knowing appropriate breeds for them. Some dogs don't do well with kids at all.
Yeah, well, and I think a big part of that too is teaching your kids what is and isn't acceptable behavior when you have dogs, because I brought my dog to a friend's house that had kids and her kids were 5 and 7 and they started yanking on his tail. And, I had to teach them that wasn't okay. But the fact that they didn't already know that, they have dogs. And I was like, your poor dogs must just be tortured. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that that's a good thing to teach kids, whether you have a dog or not, teach them how to react around other dogs, because that is something that's going to keep them safe. And then on the flip side of that, if you have a dog, don't assume everybody else loves your dog and wants you all around them. My daughter actually had a lot of dog allergies when she was younger, and we would be hiking on a trail and somebody's off-leash dog would come running up and the people would be yelling, oh, they're super friendly. And I'm like, I don't care if they're friendly. Your dog is going to come up and lick my kid's face and she's going to have an allergy attack. So don't assume that everybody loves your dog just because you love your dog, because a lot of people have allergies, and there's a lot of people that actually have trauma around dogs. Maybe they are that kid that got bit in the face when they were younger. I had an assistant years ago, And we used to bring all of our dogs to work all the time. And she was terrified every time we brought the dogs in. And it wasn't because our dogs were scary. It was because she had a scary experience in her past. And, you know, she was fine with it and she knew it was her issue and she tried to be okay. But she was genuinely afraid of like that golden retriever.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting too because like there are so many things that other people like that I don't like or that I like that other people don't like that I would never judge. But if somebody says they're not a dog person, I'm like, it's like the audacity.
No,
But
that's
like
true.
it's okay to not be a dog person, and
It is.
especially if you have trauma. So I definitely there's a lot of respect that has to come on both sides of that where it's okay if somebody's not a dog person and you need to make sure that you're respecting their boundaries.
Yeah. And I think on that note too, while we're talking about hiking trails, my biggest pet peeve is walking down a hiking trail that smells like dog shit. Like the amount of people that don't pick up their dog poop is insane to me. Carry a poop bag, actually carry 2 poop bags because you're probably going to need at least 2. And make sure you're not just leaving that tied up poop bag on the side of the trail. Remember to take it. And I'll be honest, like this was foreign for me and my husband too. Like I said, we had farm dogs. They would like go out in the field to go potty. I had never picked up dog shit in my life.
Yeah.
So it's still something my husband's a little averse to. He's like, really? We have to pick it up? I'm like, Josh, yes, you have to pick it up. So anyway, make sure that you're doing that because your one pile of poop may not feel like it's a big deal. But if everybody does that, now it's 65 piles of poop per day.
Yeah.
And it's gross.
Yeah. I always have chapstick in my pocket and I always have dog poop bags in my pocket. Pretty much everything that I own has those 2 things in the
Perfect.
pocket.
Well, there you go. I like that.
And I know that here on the trails, it's pretty popular for people to pick it up, leave the bag on the trail, and then on their way back down, they'll get it. But I think one of the biggest problems is a lot of these poop bags are like brown or are green or are blending into the natural landscape. So it's really easy to miss it on your way back down.
It's super easy to forget.
Yeah.
I did that one time and then I felt like the biggest asshole because I knew I had left my poop bag on the side of the road. And I've never done that again. I just carry it with me now. It's not that big of a deal. Like just carry the dang thing.
Yeah.
So
And something that you mentioned earlier was off leash dogs. There are a lot of off leash dog parks, and obviously, as long as you don't have a super violent, aggressive dog, it is totally okay to go to those parks and let your dog off leash and let them do their thing. But around here, there's a lot of hiking trails where it is okay for your dogs to be off leash. There's not like a rule that your dogs have to be leashed, but I do think that if your dogs are going to be off leash, they absolutely have to be controllable with voice command. You have to be able to give them a command and they can immediately come right to you.
Yeah.
Because like maybe there's little kids, maybe there's somebody that has a really aggressive dog and your dog is just going running right up to it. You know, you never really know what situation or what other person you're going to come across on those trails. So just like we said, even though you're a dog person and you love your dog, that doesn't mean that everybody else that's out hiking on that trail has the same experience.
that's a good point. And even if they are on leash, in fact, I had a scary situation with Rosie, my older golden, the one time we were hiking down Drinking Horse, and there was a guy running up the trail at us. And Rosie just like thought that she would like go over and talk to him, and because she assumed he wanted to pet her. And as she kind of like went this way, he kind of juked this way, and then they kind of switched, and he almost went over the edge of the thing. Like he slipped on the gravel and like burned out, and I thought he was going over the cliff. I have never walked that dog on that trail since. Like I'm just like, oh my God, that it was just too
Scary.
much. And so your dogs need to understand as well. Like they need practice on a leash, on a sidewalk before you take them in a narrow trail where you're going to encounter people, and you have to make sure that they're well in control as you're pulling up somebody. If you know your dog's going to do that, you need to get off the trail when somebody's coming by, especially if they're running.
Absolutely. When they're puppies, it's really important to give them plenty of practice, both on and off the leash, with voice command, with, you know, snaps, with treats. Just make sure that whether they're on leash or off leash, they're very comfortable with both. Something that some of my friends' dogs, they do listen really well, but they, same thing, were like on a farm or on a ranch and never used a leash. And now they have moved into the city as adults and their dog is really dumb on a leash and just like doesn't get it, doesn't understand it. So I think even if you're not necessarily using a leash when they're a puppy, still introducing it to them and making them comfortable with it is really important.
Yeah. Well, and you can take them into certain stores, you know, Murdoch's or some of the ranch stores are great about it, or the pet stores, I think that's great exercise for their brains to have to go in and be good and learn to be on a leash and have all the smells. And that was one thing we learned as a dog owner is it's not just physical exercise, but it's something for their brain. So them sniffing something new or having to solve a puzzle or being in a new area, that tires their brain out. And it's just as important for some of these like really smart breeds. They need that. That is actually a part of what they need in their daily activity.
And the socialization of meeting other dogs, meeting other humans that aren't their humans. That's so important, not just as puppies, but throughout their life. It's important to keep them social.
Yeah, so that they don't attack the mailman when they show up.
Yeah, my mailman loves my dog.
Exactly. Yeah, ours are on first name basis. They know them at this point, and they're kind. And if you are somebody that has an aggressive dog, this is a completely different conversation. You need to know that, and your dog needs to not be around other people or other dogs because you never know when that situation is going to turn ugly or snap. I can't tell you how many stories I know of people being at a dog park and their dog being bit by an aggressive dog, or walking down the street with their dog on a leash and some off-leash dog comes and attacks them. Like, it absolutely happens. So if you're somebody that has an aggressive dog, you better always have them on a leash or keep them inside, or get some specialized training to help figure out how to get them over that.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of dog attacks at dog parks and stuff because, of course, even if you have an aggressive dog, you still want to get them out. You want them to be able to go to the dog park and, be a normal pup. But then if they attack another dog or a person, you could end up having to put your dog down because of that.
Absolutely.
And probably won't ever be able to get home insurance ever again. That was a little dramatic, but home insurance, it's really, really hard to get a policy if you have a dog bite claim. So just be careful. Yeah.
Well, and on that note, if you are somebody whose dog does bite somebody else or somebody else's dog, you have to take responsibility for that. Mm-hmm. Like, absolutely, this isn't like we're going to go hide in the corner and hope that this doesn't come back at me. No. You need to take responsibility for any vet bills or doctor bills, and there needs to be a report filed, and you need to make sure that you take steps so that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another important part of dog ownership is making sure that they're getting checkups regularly. There's a lot of people that I know don't take their dogs in for their yearly checkup, and I'm not going to necessarily tell you that you have to do that, but like, I have seen dogs that haven't been to a vet in 6 years. And then by the time that they go in, it's like they've had worms for so long and they've had all these problems for so long that it's too far past the point of being an easy problem to fix anymore. Yeah. So I do think it's really important, just like you take care of yourself, if you go get your vaccines and whatnot, I think it's important to make sure that you're doing that for your pups as well.
I think so too. And I actually like my annual visit to the vet just because I feel like I like having a professional's eyes on them.
Yeah.
To say, like, everything looks good. They look really healthy. They're at the right weight. Their coats look good. And my dogs have some allergies that, of course, everything in my life has allergies apparently. But so I like just to have somebody else's eyes on them. And I think sometimes they can spot problems that maybe you wouldn't. And maybe not only the vet does that, but the groomer. We have a friend that's amazing. I was
just thinking of the same thing.
Dog groomer. And she says she catches things all the time that the owners don't see, whether it's, a dramatic change in weight that you don't see because you see that dog every day, or whether it's like a little bump or an abscess or stitches that had gotten infected, or she had one that had fleas and the owners didn't know. I mean, there's so many things. So I think making sure either you're grooming your pet at home or taking them into somebody that's great with them and does a good grooming, even if it's just a couple of times a year to get them trimmed up. If a dog gets really matted, it's actually really painful on their skin. It pulls on their skin and it can really be painful for them. So it's important to make sure you're taking care of that if you have a long-haired dog.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when I was working in food service, something that happened all the time was people bringing their dogs into the restaurant. And a lot of people would bring them in and claim that they were an emotional support animal. And I know that is a real thing and there are plenty of them out there. And I also know that many of the people that said they were an emotional support animal were lying. Totally. Because I knew several of those people and their dogs, and I knew for a fact that was not true. And that's just, there are so many people with allergies. B, there are so many dogs that do not have the etiquette to be inside. There was one of the dogs that came in the restaurant that peed on the booth when they were in the restaurant, and that's just unacceptable when you're serving food in there.
Totally. That's pretty much a dead giveaway, by the way. If your dog is not behaving and you're trying to tell me it's an emotional support animal, I know that that dog is not trained and not properly certified, because I
Yes.
actually had a service dog that I was training in high school. We were a puppy raiser for that. And like, they are so dialed in. A dog like that would never have that level of
Yeah.
misbehaving. So it's a dead giveaway.
Yeah,
People
absolutely.
know.
Yes. And that's one of those things where it's like you love your dog, you assume that everybody else loves your dog, but I promise you there are going to be people in that restaurant that don't love dogs, especially in a restaurant. There's all walks of life that are going to be in there. So that's a big red flag. No, no, don't do that.
And in most places, it's actually against the law to have a dog in there. So skirting the rules, like I said, there are definitely times where you need an actual service dog or something. Oh, speaking of, here's Rosie. She's now got to give her a cameo too. But yeah, so, do it if you need it, but please do follow the rules, because what happens is you get a couple of those dogs that are not legit service dogs and they give the rest of them a bad name. And then that makes owners of restaurants kind of grumpy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think one thing that I have really noticed with friends' dogs, families' dogs, is that dogs feed off of your energy. And I think that horses are the same way, where
for sure.
if you approach a dog if you're really timid and nervous and worried, they're going to feel that and they're going to give that back to you. They're going to be timid.
That's Wrigley scratching her neck and jangling her collar. So appropriate for this episode, girls.
But they're going to give that same energy back to you. So if you maybe aren't a dog person, if you are kind of unsure and maybe your friend asks you to go check in on their dog or, whatever it is, just make sure that you're going in with calm energy, with confidence, with happiness, because that dog will act very differently if you approach them like that versus super nervous energy.
Absolutely. And you're right. It is the same with horses. In fact, I grew up around horses, love horses, but my dad has this horse that I just don't trust. I think he's spooky. And this horse doesn't trust me at all. He doesn't want anything to do with me. He won't come up to me. And yesterday we were shooting videos with my video guy, Saul, and that horse came up and just loved all over him. And I'm like, he can tell you love horses. And he's like, I love horses so much.
Aw,
Like, that horse won't come near me because he knows I don't trust him. It's this mutual thing. And I think dogs are totally the same way. They always say dogs are a really good judge of character. So that's how I judge my daughter's boyfriends that she brings home. If they're good to the dogs and the dogs like them, screenplay.
Leo hated one guy that I dated, and I wish so badly that I would have listened to him. The last thing that I wanted to touch on is I do think that there is a different way of training a dog that a lot of people don't lean into. My brother and sister-in-law do this, and it's funny because I'm such a dog person that if a dog runs up to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, hi, I love you so much. And I get all excited and energetic, and then they get all excited and they're jumping up. And when I was going to my brother and sister-in-law's house for the first time, they kind of established the ground rules of how I was to interact with their dogs when I got there. They have a dog that's a few years old, and then they had a puppy that they had just gotten. And they basically asked me to completely ignore both of them until they had settled down. And then when they came up to me calm, then I could pet them. And I remember being like offended almost, where I was like, what do you mean I can't go like run up to your puppy?
Right.
But then when I watched what happened and both of the dogs came up and it was so calm and loving, and he could like crawl up in my lap and we could have the cutest interaction, and he wasn't getting excitable and jumping up, and he was well behaved. Like, that's going to be a very calm, well behaved dog throughout his life because that's how he's been trained.
Absolutely. And that is easier said than done. I give total props to people that can do that. That was absolutely our intention with these two. And I will tell you, my husband is the worst offender of this because he loves when the dogs are all over him when he comes home at the end of the day. And he comes in, puppies, oh, hi, how's everybody doing? And they're just instantly all over him. But then that means that when somebody walks in our front door, there's a good chance they're going to get mobbed by the puppies because that's the reaction that they're anticipating. So you're 100% right. You can train them how you want them and set those boundaries and those expectations up front with them.
I had a really interesting conversation with her because she went to the vet her being my sister-in-law, she went to the vet and the vets did that where they got all excited and were greeting the puppy. And she got really frustrated because she's like, I thought that going into
A professional?
yeah, exactly, that they wouldn't do that. And I was like, as humans, we're all dopamine addicted. When you squeal at a puppy and the puppy gets all excited and gives you that attention, that's the best feeling in the world, right? But is that necessarily what's best for the puppy? Probably not. But, I was like, I also can see both sides of it very clearly.
Totally, totally. I absolutely respect that. And I think that's an awesome way to train dogs. And I can tell you your guests will appreciate the dogs as they get older, even though it's a little bit hard to train them that way in the beginning. But I think that's just with everything. Like, you have to put the work in. And once you train a dog, even if you send a dog off to a dog trainer to be trained, the work still continues when you get home. You can have this dog fully trained in commands, but if you don't stay consistent with what they taught after the fact, that it's not going to stick. And that is very hard because everybody in your family has to be on that same page in order for that to be successful.
Yeah, I think something I learned the hard way too. Leo was the most perfectly behaved puppy. I had him trained so well. And so for the first few years of his life, he was such an angel. But I didn't keep the training going. I was like, okay, it's done. I got it. We're good. He's great forever. And then, of course, he started being a little asshole. And I was like, oh, wait, I have to keep reinforcing the good behavior here.
Right. Well, and to circle back to the story I told in the beginning about my first dog, Cody, that we ran agility competitions and all that stuff, she unfortunately got cancer and passed away when she was like 6. And my daughter was really young, and all she wanted for her birthday was another puppy. And so we got this border collie mini Aussie. And at that stage of our life, we were both like knee deep in our businesses. We had a 3-year-old. Like, life was hectic and crazy. And I didn't think about the fact that I did not have the time to put into training that dog the way that I needed to. I used to teach agility competition to other dogs and do all of this stuff. And I just didn't have it. I couldn't even make time to go to a training class with that dog. And so that was the stage of my life. I either should not have gotten a dog, or I should have gotten a breed that was like a couch potato type of a dog that didn't need so much, because she actually was kind of naughty. Like, one time we left the house and forgot something and turned around and came back, and we had been gone no more than 60 seconds. And she had jumped on the coffee table and taken all of the newspapers and magazines and shredded them all over the living room. We walked back in the door and she was like, oh crap. Like,
she's like, you weren't supposed to be back.
What are you doing here? I didn't even have time to enjoy this. And now I'm already in trouble.
Oh, no.
And I mean, she literally was bored. It wasn't her fault. Like, we were not keeping her busy enough. My friend Sierra said it really well the other day. She's like, we just incorporate our dogs into our life. Like, they're just a part of everything that we do. Mm-hmm. And that's great if you can be that person. But if you're somebody that wants to travel, or you're somebody that works a ton of long hours and you're not here, it's really hard. And I remember feeling like guilt when I was away too long. And that Cody that we had, that she was an amazing dog. And I used to go home and let her out at lunch every day. And one day I forgot, and I got home that night, and she went right into my closet, took out my favorite pair of shoes, chewed them up, and put them right in front of my bed. Like, it's the only time she ever did it, but it was like, don't ever forget to come home at lunch again type of a situation. So you have to know what you're signing up for. Mm-hmm. And if you love dogs and you just can't commit to doing something like that, you can volunteer, you can foster a dog potentially, or you can just kind of go in and visit the shelter or visit your friends. There is always people out there that are going to need a dog to be walked. And if you want to just have a little dog interaction here and there, then that's great. You don't have to commit and go all in with being an owner. That being said, these two, it's like one of the most rewarding things. You want to talk about true unconditional love, get a golden retriever.
They're the sweetest. Well, I am actually on the foster list for our local animal shelter, and I get emailed about once a week, whether it's, maybe they have a litter of puppies that came in, or it's just they have all of their regular shelter dogs. They could use an overnight visit to feel a little bit of love and, get out of the shelter for 24 hours.
Love that.
And then I also have a friend that she can't commit to having her own dog, but she started working for Rover and just doing dog sitting. And she said it has totally filled her bucket because she can do like overnight house sits and she's getting paid for it. But she said it's so nice because she just gets to hang out with all these super cool doggos, and then she builds relationships with the owners and gets to hang out with the dogs in the future. So there's definitely ways that you can still spend time around dogs if you can't commit to owning one yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, if this resonated with you or if there's somebody in your life that this made you think of, please share it with them. Like, subscribe. We're on Spotify and on YouTube if you want to watch our shenanigans. But thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you guys so much. And here's to empowering each other, one story at a time.
See you next week.